There's a little bit of sunshine on the 27th day of April 2001, and I am standing before what used to be the entrance to the Land of Make-Believe, which opened here in 1954, as you can easily see when you take a look at the old train on the top and the date. Unfortunately, this was a battle between the old man and the river, because we're right on the banks of the Ausable River in Upper J, New York. And Arto Monaco had a dream many years ago to start this little village in miniature, and my kids and lots of other kids visited it down through the years, but so did Mother Nature. Springtime, this Ausable River, this branch and the other branches, well, sometime raged pretty high, and more than once came over the banks and just about wiped out Arto Monaco. He would stand tall with a straight back and build again and open again, but finally the river won. The man who developed the Land of Make-Believe is an incredible talent. He is an artist, he is an inventor, he is a toy maker, he is a raconteur, a storyteller of the first magnitude. So today we're going to start to tell the story of Arto Monaco, who was born here in the Ausable Forks area not far from here in 1913. And at the age of just about 88, he's still going strong after some major physical setbacks. He's still doing what he loves to do best. You will find out in the course of this, the first in a series of programs, that this is one of the most incredible personalities you've ever met. He's been written about, he's been talked about. Movies have been done about his life. We'd like to see a full-length movie done. A lot of newspaper articles, a recent one in the Adirondack Life in spring of 2001. Newspaper articles, public television did a great story inside the museum. Ultimately, you will be getting inside this little museum to see some of the things that Arto Monaco has created during his lifetime. Please, if you've never watched one of our programs called Our Little Corner all the way through, get Grandma and Grandpa and all the kids and neighbors around the television set. Not the kids today? Strong language. Get the kids around and look at some of the things that we're going to do. I should tell you, yes, before we begin this program, that if ever there was a definition of a salty dog, it's Arto Monaco. Before you watch this program, you have to realize that on Hometown Cable, we do not do very much editing at all. There will be some very strong language in this program which we would not edit out, or you'd hear a lot of bleeps. This is the man. Arto Monaco does not try to present himself as anything but what he is. He is a boy from Ausable Forks and Upper J who's been around the world and done everything, and his language kind of reflects the kind of person he is. So, with that warning in mind, we invite you to join us for the rest of this program, Chapter 1 in the life of Arto Monaco, from the scene of the original Land of Make-Believe in Upper J, New York. That's appropriate that we should start with a picture of Frederick Remington, because last summer, Calvin and I, it was last summer, wasn't it? Calvin and I went up to Ogdensburg and went through that museum. I've been around this North Country all my life off and on, had never been inside that museum on Washington Street in Ogdensburg. Last year we did the tour and we were so impressed. Arto Monaco, how the heck are you, buddy?
Fine, thank you.
Well, it's so great to be here. Thank you for inviting us. You like Remington, didn't you?
I like Remington, and I have a friend who gave me this print, but that's just a print, but he has originals. I don't know how many. And he's also on the board of directors at Remington Museum. Charles R. Wood.
Isn't
You've
that
heard
great?
of Charlie Wood.
Oh, sure.
A great guy. And so I started to tell you about when we were talking about Matthew Brady and those people.
I asked Arto when I sat down here if he had ever heard of William Henry Jackson, the famous photographer who worked with Brady, who did tour the West before Yellowstone was popular. His photographs actually are the reason that we have a national park, the first national park in Yellowstone today. And I was doing some research based on an interview I did with a friend of mine called Harold Bates up in Katyville, whose brother was in a camera club with this guy. And I got on the internet, and it says, born 1842, son of a blacksmith in Keysville, New York. Yeah. And Arto and I just start chewing the fat, and Calvin always gets nervous because he's afraid we're going to digest all these great stories before he gets that cotton picking red light going on the camera. But we've had a lot of famous people from around.
Well, yes, you had, I can remember as a young boy, you had Milton Sills used to come up here, and Doris Kenyon was a movie star from Osceola Forks, very famous in their days. Of course, I'm going back a long while before you were even thought of. But then we had Buster Crabbe had a camp up at Saranac, and Veronica Lake, and then you had a lot of movie producers here and directors and people of that sort. J. Cheever Cowden had a place up in the Keene Valley State, and then he built a farm here in Osceola. And you had Rockwell Kent, of course, lived in Osceola.
You worked for him, didn't you?
I worked for Rockwell when I was a young man, 15, 16 years old. And then, as a matter of fact, it's a long story, he helped me get into art school because I was a dropout. And I wasn't going to do anything in life, and he convinced me to go to art school. I didn't want to be an artist. Hell, I wanted to be a flyer, a big engineer, and go to Africa and build some bridges or something. And now I don't even want to get in an airplane. But we had Louis Milestone, John Steinbeck. I did quite a lot of storyboard sketches for them when they were doing Grapes of Wrath. And
did you really?
Yeah, and also for Mice and Men. And that was, I did the storyboard plus the titles. And Don Logging Stewart, who was a famous screenwriter, he lived right here in Upper J. And Mrs. Milestone, who was a movie actress, not big, but she was a movie actress. And those people influenced my whole life because my dad used to have a tavern, and they went, I don't want to go into depth of all this.
We got 2 hours. As long as this tape lasts, we're going to talk.
So Dad had a tavern, and they used to come to, of course, he's in a lot of different businesses. It's all their different stories. But he had this tavern, and they used to come up to his place because he was known for his spaghetti dinners and stuff, Italian restaurant. And they used to come up there and drink and raise hell and dance and let their hair down, see, because it was different than living in Hollywood, right? So, and a lot of very famous people spent their summers right here in the Adirondacks, because in those days they got on a train and came here, or they drove their cars. They came from California here on a train to Plattsburgh and come down here. And they didn't go to Europe and things like nowadays. What the hell, they run off to Europe. They don't come here. But back in those days, it was very loaded with famous people. Famous or infamous, whatever way you want to put it.
What was the story about the hats that you were just telling me before we started the camera?
Well, I was in New York City one time and on a buying trip with my wife, and I to pass some time away, I went up to see the new, what the heck was the name of that place? I just mentioned it a minute
Not the
ago.
Lincoln Center?
Yeah, the Lincoln Center. And as I walked in, there was a great, tremendous showcase, and it was filled with hats. And I thought, what the hell they got a showcase filled with hats for? And then as I looked at closer, they were famous hats. You know, for Eisenhower's hat and MacArthur's hat and Tom Mix's hat and all the famous hats. And it said the Americans were great hat lovers, and we are, I guess. And then all of a sudden I saw this hat, and it says Eva Tangway, Keysville, New York.
There you go.
Well, she was a very famous girl, and she used to be famous for that song, I Don't Care. I Don't Care.
Yeah. Look at the gleam in his eye. I think he does remember that.
Oh, yeah.
And she was from this area.
Yes,
Another one.
very famous.
Well, as you said,
I met a lot of funny people. You know, do you ever hear of a lady by the name of Sally Stanford
of course.
from Stanford
Yeah.
University? Well, she used to be a madam. Before she was a madam, she was a prostitute. But then she got her own business, and she had a house there in San Francisco. And during the war, it was she had a lot of customers, like all the famous, the generals and the senators and everybody that went out to California for some reason or other always went to Sally Stanford's place. Well, right after the war, they wanted to. They decided they got to get rid of her. So she was given. She was a good friend of the police chief, and he told her, he said, "Sally, you've got to close this place up." Now she had all first-class girls, or no trash, just first class. And he said, "You got to get rid of this place because a lot of the do-gooders in the city want this place closed up." And I remember there was a headline once in the newspaper there. It said something like, they were talking about getting rid of the trolley cars in San Francisco, and some people were trying to save the trolley cars, and the newspaper says, "To hell with the trolley cars, let's save Sally Stanford."
Okay.
Well,
Oh,
she
boy.
was married to this Stanford fellow,
Yeah.
the college people and the railroad people, and they didn't like her. They didn't like the idea that their son is marrying Sally. She was a pretty woman, nice, a great person. And so she sold her place, closed it up, and went across the bridge in Sausalito and built a restaurant. Well, that's where all the Stanford high monkey monks lived. I say high monkey monk because that's an old word
Sure.
for us old timers. Today we'd say the elite.
Yeah,
But-
really.
But anyway, she said she went over there just to annoy him. She said, "Hello, over there and there," and
Stir it up, huh?
they were madder than hell. I met her because one time when I was in San Francisco, I went across the bridge and I'd asked someone, "Where's a good place to go to dinner tonight?" A different place, and say, "Why don't you go to Sally Stanford's?" So I said, "Oh, well, she used to be a madam here," and said, "Yeah, well, she runs a restaurant now." So I went over there, and my wife and two other people, and I asked the bartender. I took around him for a while. I had a really interesting place. It was all decorated like a boudoir, practically the whole restaurant. And I said, "Is Mrs. Stanford? Does she ever come in here?" And the bartender said, "Yeah, she has an apartment upstairs." I said, "God," I said, "I'd like to meet her." He said, "You would?" Of course, I'm only about I'm about 30 years old now. And so he said, "Well, she'll be coming down those stairs in a few minutes." He said, "Why don't you hang around and you'll see her?" So she came down the stair, and I was standing at the newel post. She had a bar there she'd saved from some old saloon, all shot up, and everything. And she did it in the gay 90s style, the whole place. Well, anyway, she came downstairs, and she was probably 60 years old. She was a hell of a good-looking woman. Beautiful figure. And I said, "Mrs. Stanford?" She says, "Yes. What can I do for you?" I said, "Well, I just wanted to meet you." She said, I introduced myself, and she said, "Where are you from?" I said, "Well, you wouldn't know where I'm from." "Well, tell me where you're from." I said, "Well, it's just a little place that no one's ever heard of, way back east." "Well, you tell me where you're from." I said, "Well, I'm from a place near Lake Placid." You're near Lake Placid. "Where?" I said, "Upper J." She says, "I know where Upper J is." I said, "You do? How would you know where Upper J is?" She says, "I know where Keene, Upper J, Wilmington, Lake Placid." She said, "When I was a young girl, we used to get on a train and go to Saranac Lake for the winter carnival."
There you go.
She said, "We went there for the winter carnival." Of course, that's a long while before Placid got to be famous. And she knew all these people that, as a kid, I knew them too. Ben Osicki and Charlie Dutraw and lots of other. I haven't got time to name them today. But and they were skaters. And she said, "We used to stay at the Saranac Lake Hotel there." And she said, "I remembered the lobby was real interesting. And I said, it's never been changed. They kept it restored like you've seen it.
Sure.
And she said, we'd spend a winter, maybe she'd about a month there, go sleigh riding, and we used to take tours around, and we'd go through Upper J and Wilmington and all those places. And of course, that was before Whiteface had but she mentioned Whiteface Mountain. She said, but there was no ski. I said, well, now there's a road up there, and there's a ski trail up there, and everything else. But there was a lot of famous people around the places like that.
Isn't that interesting to go all the way to the West Coast and meet somebody from back east? But this happens to me throughout my lifetime. I'm sure it's happened to you, and you'd be a long ways from here.
Yeah.
And talk about
you
back
go down
home.
life's highway. I always think of my life as a straight line, right? And you go down a way and you get a little bit bored, you take a road to the right. Now that leads you one thing, or maybe you went to the left, it's completely different. And each thing in my life, I kept taking those side roads, and they led to something. Like when when I got out of art school, I wanted to head for California. And I didn't know what what I was going to do. But I wanted to get to heck, and I went to California. And night before last, I saw a movie of during the Depression days of the poor people from Texas and Oklahoma and things during the Depression and during the sandstorms and all that. And I thought, I felt very bad. I said, at the time I didn't think of it, but I had a new car. And I didn't have much money, but I had enough to eat on. And we went I used to stop sometimes and talk to those people. Of course, I was 22 years old or so, I was curious. Had a couple other fellows with me. And then I thought, they must have envied us. And then I feel guilty. I shouldn't have stopped to make those people feel, geez, I wish I had a new car. I've always felt, I felt bad about it. It still bothers me.
Isn't that amazing after all these years?
Yeah.
But you're right about that, about life being, the straight road, and if you don't get off to the side, it's no fun at all.
Dad said, I said, I'm going to California. So he said, okay. So he said to Mr. Milestone and and to Stuart, he said, now listen, my father was Italian, of course, spoke broken English. He said, now listen now, you guys, my boy, he's going to go to California. And you treat him good, or you look after him. If you don't look after him good, when you come back next summer, come to my place to eat. So they loved Dad for that. Well, anyway, so that's how I met a lot of those people. Was just
Where did you go to art school?
Pratt Institute in Brooklyn.
And how old were you?
Oh, about 18, I guess, somewhere around there.
So you must have started drawing long before that.
Well, I did draw just for the fun of it, And then Rocco Kent one time was in Dad's bar, and he saw some of the work I did. I painted some murals on the bar. Of course, those murals weren't very much compared to what I do now. I painted the last mural I painted it was 129 feet long, 16
Come
feet high.
on. Where was that?
Down in Lake George. You could go there and take a picture of it anytime you wanted to.
My goodness.
I did it in 5 weeks. Never knew to brush anybody or not.
Just little tiny brushes?
I could spread paint a lot faster than I can now.
So he inspired you. He inspired you, Rockwell Kent.
Oh, yeah. And he got me to go to art school. He got me into art school, he and another lady from Upper J who was a friend of the Pratts, because I was a dropout and they didn't want to accept kids that hadn't graduated. Anyway, I went there, and then I decided I wanted to go to California.
So you did it.
And I went there, and one thing, that's the way. I took that right road.
Yep.
And then that led onto another road. Now, Rocco's wife was married to Louis Milestone. See? So I used to run errands for all those people, because I was impressed with them, You know how a kid is. These guys are working some big movie stars. So when I got to California, I lived with the Milestones for a while. They looked after me, and Mrs. Kent, and they had a nephew who was kind of wild, and they thought, well, I'd be good influence, because I didn't drink, of course, I always swore and raised hell, but I never drank see, till I was about, Christ, I must have been 20, 21 years old. Oh, I had some cider we stole some time. We stole some cider, but I mean, I never drank it, never cared for it. Not that it was against my religion or anything. Hell, it didn't bother me that. But anyhow, Mrs. Milestone had me decorating some of her walls. And I was working at MGM then, but you needed extra money. I only earned $11.80 a week. So
for MGM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So wasn't too bad. Better than $5. In Christ, you could buy breakfast for 20 cents.
That's true.
Bacon and eggs and home fried potatoes and coffee and orange juice, 20 cents.
Wow.
Well, anyhow, so she would have me do that, and one day, just happened, if she hadn't asked me to decorate the walls of her dressing room, Mrs. Gershwin, Ira Gershwin's wife, would never seen it, right? So she saw it. She said, "Oh, geez, I'd like to have this kid do something for me." And I was tickled to death to earn a few extra bucks, see, because you want to take a girl out on a date or something, there was no money, $11.80 a week. You just kept your car and fed and paid. You do whatever you have to. So that was extra money. So I moonlighted all the time. When I spent most of my time in the studio, even after supper at night. I lived there. I was fascinated. I wasn't interested in ever being a movie actor. I wasn't interested in the artist work. I wanted to be production stuff for motion pictures. That's always been my hobby, life, wanting to do that.
So you did some work for Mrs. Gershwin.
Well, then, yeah, I did some work for her. She asked me if I'd paint her cabanas. Well, Jesus, I didn't know. She might have just well said to paint the cheeks of my butt. I didn't know what the cabanas was. Country boy. Remember, I'm a hillbilly. So but I went along with her. I said, I made it look like I knew what to tell. So I looked in a books or some goddamn place I found there. I asked somebody, and they said, "No, I know what happened. I remember." And then she said, "Oh, I want to show the cabanas to you." So she took me out, and you know what the cabana, Christ, right around the swimming pool. Well, country boy, I didn't know. We'd have said a dressing room, right? So I did all those for her, and I did a lot of other work. And I never met Ira. I never met George Gershwin, but her husband, Ira Gershwin, and they had a fellow, Oscar Levant. He was a good friend of theirs.
Oh my, what a guy!
And I used to be working there decorating, and he and Ira would be working on lyrics. He played piano, and Ira would work on the lyrics. And one day he said to me, "You owe me," I forgot what he said, $900 or something. I thought, well, Mr. Levant, I wouldn't call him. I call her Lee, and I call Mr. Gershwin and Mr. Levant. But I always call those girls by the first name. And I said, "Well, I don't understand you. I never bored him." And he said, "No, but what about a concert? I've been giving you a private concert here. When I go out and I give a concert, I get big money for it. And I've been giving you one here every day for the last week." And geez, I said, "Well, I didn't ask you to play for me." And then he laughed. He had a hell of a good sense of humor. But for a minute, he scared me. I thought, well, Jesus, I hadn't been around those big people. What the hell did I know?
What a character Levant was.
Yeah?
He had a lot of serious problems later in his life, but he was a genius, no question.
Yeah, he was. And I saw a movie just about a week ago of the Gershwin, George Gershwin story. And in it, they showed Ira Gershwin, and they had Lee Gershwin, and Oscar Levant played himself.
A cameo. Wasn't that must have taken you back in time?
I just loved that part because he's such a nice guy. But then she passed me off on to Fanny Bryce and then Ray Milland.
We're dropping names here. Fanny Bryce, Ray Milland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Dorothy Parker.
Oh yeah.
Of course, a lot of those people were controversial,
Oh sure.
But they never preached their damned politics to me. But of course, I was young. I was a kid when I think about it now. I was 20, 21, somewhere around there.
But then you worked for different studios. What kinds of work did you do for the studio?
Same thing. I went to to from MGM. I went over to. I was with Disney for just a few weeks, nothing about anything. But I had a chance to, and then I went over to Warner Brothers. See, I had a lot of wanderlust in me. You know, I'd be there. Well, I think I'd like to go to Warner Brothers because over there I'm going to meet a lot more new movie stars
Sure.
and a lot of different directors and see what they're like. And I remember I went back did that to MGM a couple of times, and then once I came all the way to New York and I only stayed 30 days. Worked for Paramount down in. They used to be on Broadway and 7th Avenue. And I had a cartoon studio there, and the boss at MGM said, "Listen, next time you leave, don't keep, next time I've already give you a job back 2-3 times. You're going to stay, and if you leave, you can't come back. Understand? Now, we'd be good friends, but you can't stay." So I promised. And it wasn't more than about 4 months, I guess. And I went in and said, "Mr. Maxwell," I said, I got to tell you, I'm leaving. "You remember what I told you?" I said, "Yes, but this time I have to go in the Army." "Oh," he said, "well, under those conditions, you can come back." But I never did go back. Oh, I went back after the war, and I called on a lot of the people at the studios. But I didn't go back to work there. The last time I went back there was after the war. Well, I was there during the war, too. It's such a mixed-up life I had. See, when I went in the Army in Aberdeen, there I created well, I didn't create it alone, but I was given orders to create it, so I did, the Training Aids Division for the Ordnance. And they didn't have such a thing in that Army when I went in. Nowadays, I suppose they have big... And after being at Aberdeen for quite a while, they said, "Take half your company and split it and go to California, open up another Training Aids Division." And so while I was there, I went back to see a lot of the old gang, and I had my wife then. They all wanted to meet her. And but it's a pretty complicated history.
Well, when you were in the service, now you were in the Army? What
Yeah.
year? What year did you join, or were you drafted?
I volunteered 1940, I think it was. Yeah, 40.
And
I was supposed to be in for a year. And I remember one incident when we went to Albany, and then from there I went to Lake Placid, from there to Albany, and to Camp Upton in Long Island. And there at Camp Upton, they were marching me out some damn place to fight a forest fire or something, and I had this other friend that I'd met on the way down to Long Island, and they were marching off to fight a forest fire somewhere. And I heard a guy say, "Hey, Monaco, is that you?" And I turned around and said, "Hey, Jimmy Snow?" He said, "Yes." And it was Jimmy Snow from All-Sable Forks.
Related to Leonard?
He might be. I don't know for
But
sure.
you said you went to school with Leonard.
Oh, yeah. So this guy said, he jumped off the bulldozer, and he came over to where we were marching, and he said to the corporal, I had a little red-headed corporal. I'd had a lot of trouble with him the first 2-3 days I was there.
I can
Little
imagine.
bastard, And so he said, "Hey, I want to talk to these soldiers." And so the corporal stopped the troop for a minute, and he said, "I want to take this man to help me on the bulldozer." And so that was to get me out of there. And he said, "You can't take him." He said, "Well, I'm taking him." He said, "Well, you can't take him." He said, "Oh, by geez, I outrank you, and I'm taking him." So the kid that was with me, my friend Phil Kellison, said, "Take me too." So he said, "I need the other fellow too." And he says, "Come on." And we went over and we got on that bulldozer and helped him pull stumps. Well, that was just a way of passing time away. Christ, we didn't do anything for a week. And then they sent me and this friend of mine, Kellison, off to Aberdeen, Maryland, the Proving. proving grounds in the Aberdeen Training Center. See, they have the Ordnance Department has a training center there, plus the Aberdeen Proving Ground is there. And so after I'd been there a few days, they said, you probably read this article in the magazine. They said, is there anybody, Sergeant Command says, anybody here can paint a sign? I said, sure, I can paint a sign. I figured, Christ, it's better than picking up cigarette butts and raking and drilling. I hated drilling. Geez, I hated drilling. So I came forward and he said, come with me. And he took me up to the office there and he said, we need some signs painted. And he said, we got some boards here. And I had some black paint and a brush or something. He said, we want to make a whole bunch of signs that don't throw cigarette butts in the urinals. Well, that was a great send-off. But it was still better than out there marching. So I went a couple days and pretty quick he came back in and said, that Monaco? And I said, yep. He said, come with me. He said, I went up to the office and he said, I want to send you up to a Lieutenant Churchill. Now, Churchill, when I tell the story, they're all young, young officers, lieutenants. And he said, he's got an idea. So Churchill explained to me that we're going to be in trouble before long. And we got to train a lot of men. And the old-fashioned way of training the men was to get a pistol, or disassemble it, and show you how it worked. Now, how many men can you get around and see that? You're not more than 25. And he said, can you come up with some ideas where we can train 100 men, one man? Because we're not going to have enough instructors. So if one instructor can train a lot of men, it'd be better. So we put our heads together and came up with the idea of remember the old-fashioned charts, doctor charts, lift off the skin, you get the lungs, and then you get the skeleton and so on. So I came up with that idea, and we started making these things. Now, they can hang the chart on a wall, and you could get 100 men here, and you're over there against the wall, and they're 4x8 size. I can show you pictures of them. And then you only have to have one instructor for 200 men, see? So then they come up and say, we got to train more men. We got to have more methods. So we come up with all sorts of ideas. I was in the department alone for 2 or 3 days, and finally I got my friend in there helping me. And gradually, and I won't go into a lot of detail, but gradually it kept growing until it grew from 4 or 5 men to I had about 190 men.
Wow.
And we created everything big, we created small. Like we built a railroad car, about 3 foot long, and we built all the little army tanks. And then we showed soldiers, you could gather them around, a couple 100 men, and show them how you could load a flat car, the whole train. Then we took something small, like a Jeep switch, or a 45 caliber pistol. We made that big. We made the switch that big. Now you can have 500 men out there and show them how that works. So then we came, when Plexiglas, we got the idea, came into use, making Plexiglas parts of everything. And make a whole pistol out of Plexiglas. And coloring that Plexiglas with different colors. Now if you put them on a Bell Optica projector, you can project that in color, and you can move all those little parts just like a real gun. And then we made the M1, we made a model of that, big model, and you could actually see the cartridge drop in, fire, go out. The bullet didn't really go out the barrel, but it went all the end. And all electronic, and that was a big success. Well, anyway, in the very beginning, we had no materials, no supplies or anything. We used whatever we had, this other fellow, myself, and another artist, and we used their own drawing equipment. We had a few things with us, you brought with you from home. And finally one day I said to the lieutenant, well, we don't have any more materials. He said, well, there's no appropriation for that. The Army works funny, If they don't have an appropriation that says this is for an eraser, you can't get an eraser. You gotta everything's cut and dried. So he gave us all a 3-day pass. We went home and got all the materials we had. And that kept us going for about 3-4 weeks. Well, then we got some more men in. We kept building more men and more men. And so, as the department, built up, we needed supplies all the time. So he said, well, one of the boys said to me, "Jesus, why don't we go over to headquarters and see if we can't get some money off the, ask the general." Well, no one dared to have there, but I had plenty of guts because I'd learned all that back in the movies business. So I went over, I was elected, I went over and I walked in, I said to a girl, "I'd like to see the general." And she said, "You can't see the general." "Well, why can't I see the general?" "Well, she didn't say, "Well, you're just a buck-ass private, you can't see the general." But there was a Captain Call there. And Captain Call said, "What's your problem?" And I said, "I'm over training aides." He said, "Yes, I know. I head up the training. I'm a head of training." He said, "Well," then I said, "we don't have any material to work with. You want all this stuff done? We have no material. We've used all our own personal material." And I said, "I thought maybe somebody could give us some money." Begging. So the general's in the other room and the door's open. And I heard him say, "What's going on out there, Bill?" Bill called. And he said, "What's going on out there, Bill?" And he said, "Well, there's a soldier here wants to get some money for something." He said, "Well, send him in there." So I went in and he said, "What's your problem?" He was a very wonderful man. I loved him. He was the youngest general in the United States Army. And his name was B.W. Simpson. And that was my first meeting with him. And he said, "What can I do for you, soldier?" I said, "Well, General, I know it's a funny request, but maybe you could loan us some money." He says, "What?" Well, I said, "I don't know how else to ask you, but we have to make all these training aids things for training." He said, "Oh, yes, I see your work every day. I see it." And he said, "Well, what's the problem?" I said, "Well, there's no money to buy more material. We've been using our own money, the soldiers." And he said, "Well, that's not right." But he said, "You got nerve enough to come in here and ask me to loan you money?" And I said, "Well, I was elected." He said, "Well, I'll tell you, I'm not going to loan you a penny, but I am going to be able to get you some supplies to tide you over." So he gave me a slip to go to Aberdeen Proving Ground, just a mile up there, and got it from their art department. See, there's 2 different divisions. So that tided us over. And while I was up there, I met a fellow who was in charge up there, and he said, "Geez, I'd like to be down there where you fellows are working," because he was asking what we were doing. I told him all the models we were building on. He said, "Oh, he was a draftsman, and he just drew mechanical stuff. Boy, I'd love to work with you guys." So he said, "Well, let us have a lot of material, and we'll see if we can't get you down there." So he'd give us a whole bunch of stuff. I went back and I told the lieutenant, and the lieutenant said, "There's a fellow up at Proving Ground. We could use him because he's a mechanical drafting. Most of the fellows that are working with me, they're all artists. They are not draftsmen." So he said he had him transferred. So then we was getting to be a big department. And we still needed materials. It was running low. So Lieutenant Churchill said, "Look, the only way we can get materials is if we get appropriation from Congress for this particular thing, the training aid division, to develop and build all kind of aids that will help train the soldiers to go overseas." Okay. So he said, "All right." We went around, he said, "Put on a show. How long it'd take to get ready?" And we told him, "Well, maybe a couple of weeks." He said, "I want you to make a big show, and we'll get the senator or somebody up here to see it." And we put on this show. We had built a big cardboard howitzer, a full-size howitzer,
No
all
kidding.
made out of wood and cardboard.
Wow.
Had that on stage. They had a 2,000-man stage now.
Yeah.
They used to have a 200-man theaters. Then they had a 2,000-man theater. So we got permission to put it on there. We had all these charts we make. We had a lecturer come out and give them a lecture on how to disassemble a pistol. We had all these big models and a little model on stage, real theatrical, American flags flying. Put on a hell of a show because some of these artists had been in civilian life. They worked for places like one guy came from Radio City, young fella, and he knew a lot about stage settings and stuff like that. Anyway, we put on a hell of a show. We went to the cook and baker's school and said, look, if everybody liked to have a nameplate, you know, for their desk in those days, and there was this, we had ordered, don't make nameplates for anybody. And there, because everybody comes to us because we were the artists and sign painters to go do it. So he said, if you will give us next week, Thursday, we're going to have this big show, and we got to entertain these congressmen and people. Would you, if you'll make some nice cakes for us, and you make a sandwich, you make all this stuff, we're going to make nameplates for all of you. Well, geez, right away.
Yeah.
So they give us all the food and stuff, and the Lieutenant Churchill said, well, I got a couple quarts of whiskey put away, and he said, I think I can get one from the general or somebody else anyway. So we got everything you need to put on a nice smorgasbord. And we put on this show. They had 3 or 4 congressmen. I don't know who they were. And they had a bunch of generals. Oh, they always have to have a lot of generals around. A million lieutenants. And we put on the show. And they loved it. Of course, afterwards they had a nice, food coming out their ears and drinks and everybody, and they were all in a good mood and everything. And they went back to Washington and appropriated us $50,000.
Big money back then.
Jesus.
That was
Now we can buy everything we need to do all this work. Because, you know, it took plywood, it took plastics, it took paper, it took everything. I remember one case when we were short of supplies, we went to Baltimore, got the Jeep, went to Baltimore, and went around trying to scrounge up drawing paper and stuff. So we went in the store there. We had a fellow by the name of Schultz, and he had a lot of nerve. And he went into the store and said, I go John Wanamaker. It wasn't Wanamaker's. I forget the place in Baltimore. Well, it doesn't make any difference. And he said, we need 2 big rolls of your wrapping paper, you know, full cider. And of course, the store said, well, we don't sell wrapping paper. He said, will you use it? I said, yeah. Well, we're here from the United States Army. We need 2 rolls of paper. So they didn't question the United States Army. So they put him on the counter, and they said, he put him on, give them to a couple boys to carry out, and they said, well, who pays for this? And he said, send the bill to the United States Army, Washington, D.C., for 2 rolls of paper. Well, you know goddamn well, they never got paid yet. You have to have requisition. But that's the way we operated. And we finally got to be recognized. Mrs. Roosevelt came up from Washington to see all the work we were doing. But we started in a little place about big as this. They kept building. Finally, I had a big 2-story building, and there was a big deal then.
Is that where you built the replica town?
The replica town I built in California after we got sent us there. That was a place called Anadorf. They wanted back there. That was later in the war.
Oh, I see.
Oh, I have to tell you something quickly. There were a lot of funny things I haven't told you about there. But anyway, I had learned way back in California. I used to be very shy, and I got kicked around.
It's hard for me to believe.
Well, I got kicked around a lot. And when I went to art school in New York City, I met a young fellow, and we became good friends, been friends all our lives. He died a couple of years ago. And we'd go get on a trolley car or something, and I'd always sit back. Remember, I'm a little country boy. I'm up there in the Adirondack. What the hell I know what's going on? So I would step back and let a little old lady on and a little old man on and some pretty office girl, and I kept with. And he said, look, you're in New York now. You don't step back for anybody. If you have to push the old lady aside, you push her aside. And the office girls, you take your wife and you push her. You don't give anybody the right of way. You get on that trolley car. Otherwise, he said, you're going to stay here all day. Well, I learned a little bit. When I went to California, I was awful interested in motion picture business. Not acting, but the producing of pictures. So, and I wanted to see everything there was. And I was assigned to the cartoon studio. Just outside the cartoon studio, I could go right out the back door like I can here and step right on the back lot. And where there was, like the Andy Hardy town, that was right out back, and all Judy Garland, all those kids were there. And so I used to spend a lot of time there, and I used to eat in the commissary, so I'd get to see all the movie stars and things. But I used to like to go on a lot of time when they'd be shooting a movie, maybe late at night even. Christ, movies, they shoot all night long sometimes. But they'd have closed sets. Now, Myrna Loy always had a closed set. She was a wonderful person, but when the movie was being shot, she didn't want extra people, except the people who were actually supposed to be working on it. So I'd want to get on those closed sets, a lot of different ones. So I used to wear a vest, and I had a clipboard, and I always wore a pair of glasses, and I put that pencil right there, and I always roll up my sleeves. It seemed to me like you have, see? That makes you sort of professional when you roll up your sleeves.
Okay.
And
I'm glad to hear that.
And I'd go up to the, and they always have it, when they have a closed set, they have a guard out front, and you can't go in. And when they're LED light, no one can go in there anyway. But a closed light, when the light goes off, then people can go in if you belong, if you're supposed to be working on that set. Well, I'd go up to the, and I'd take my pencil and I'd write down something, and I'd say, look at the guy's badge, and I'm going to put that down, and I said, let me see this, Myrna Loy said, okay. I said, I have to go in and check out the set. And if they ever questioned me, by that time they didn't question me. You must be some, checking me and everybody else. If he says, well, I'm sorry, you still can't go in there. Well, I said, well, you get on the phone and you call Mr. Mayor. And I tell him that I'm down here and you won't let me in. Well, no one damn way am I going to call Louis B. Mayor.
So you got it?
Right? So I used to pull that same thing after I got in the Army. I could go in any place I wanted to and get away with all sorts of things. And
You just had curiosity. You wanted to know things. You wanted to be places.
So in the Army, I used to do the same thing. When they said, you can't have an Army Jeep assigned to you every day anymore. You have to go down every day and get the Jeep and sign it out for that particular job. I said, well, I'm not going to do that. Well, I had a flunky work in there. All his job was do, I guess, was, it's long stories. I can't get into it. But I had this kid there, and he was assigned to us, and they didn't know what to do with him. So my personnel man said, well, you're Sergeant Monaco's aide. Well, now, a sergeant don't have an aide, but he didn't know any difference, and it give him busy. And Major Churchill, now he's mayor, he says, I don't care what you're doing, keep him up there and keep him busy. So he made him my aide. And so he'd go down, I'd say, go down into the motor pool and get the Jeep. And he'd go down and get the Jeep. They said, well, we can't sign a Jeep out for all day. We have to know where you're going and what's for and like that. So he'd call up the office and say, the motor pool sergeant say, well, you can't have a Jeep unless we know where it's going and everything. I said, listen, if you got any questions, you call the general right now. He says I have the Jeep every day. You call him and fight it out with him. Well, I know goddamn well he's not going to call any general and say, is it okay to take the Jeep? So we always had the Jeep.
So you found a way to get things done, didn't you?
That's the way you do things.
And how long were you in the Army?
I was in there 4 years and 9 months. I went in for a year. I have to tell you from a point, they asked you, said, put on a war bond show up in New York. So, okay, that was a project. We took about 25, 30 men, and we took all kind of equipment to New York, and tanks and machine guns and everything. We set it up in the Palace, a place called the Palace in New York, in a convention center. And we had to let people work the machine guns, and we had an ambulance there. We had some Red Cross nurses there, and you could get in the ambulance and say you were in an Army ambulance, and we had all sorts of things, that people like to do. Because then we'd sell war bonds. And we built a gas chamber, and it was about big as this woman here. It was all built out of homosoap, and you could go in that room, you put on the gas mask, and then you put you through a place with the tear gas, and then you exit the other place. Well, God, somewhere along the line, the goddamn thing leaked. Like I'd always catch a nail for something. So it leaked, and people were coughing all over the place, and Jesus, finally we get up, and that's the first time I think I ever saw duct tape. Now, one of the boys
I didn't think it was invented then.
Yeah, well, one of the boys got up there and put that stuff on there. Anyway, we sold a lot of war bonds, and everything went over good, but we built one display, and I had a Nazi plane. I had like a city of New York, you know. It was about this big, a shadow box, and it was a Nazi warplane. My friend Kellis and I had him build the airplane. He liked to build airplane models. And he had this crashed Nazi plane right in the heart of New York City, like Broadway. And Churchill said, "Jesus Christ," he said, "you can't put that out there." He said, "We aren't at war yet." Now, I think we're going to go to war. But he said, don't start the war having the Nazis landing here in New York City.
Isn't that?
Well, I thought it was pretty good to, scare them. So we had to paint the cross off, and they just. But anyhow, when we went to California, then out there we had another war bond rally, and they told us we held it at the Coliseum, and they said we could use the Coliseum, but you cannot hurt the grounds, the grass. Well, you're going to mark it up some. He said, yeah, but don't do any bad destruction. So we didn't, but we planted these pallets all over the field, and put the explosives on top of the thing. In the movies, you use Fuller's Earth on a quarter of a stick of dynamite, and you can make them big bombs. That's all that stuff you see. Of course, they also use gasoline a lot, but we didn't use gasoline. But we ran out of Fuller's Earth, it's brown, and that spreads all over it. So the fellow assisted me, you know how things pass on. I said to Clark, have one of those flunkies go down and get some Moresco. Remember the old Moresco years ago? They used to have powdered paint, came in 2-quart cans, paper boxes, 2 quarts. You mix it with water or milk, and you put just like latex finish. Lasts forever. So I said, get some of that powdered Moresco. We can use that in the place of Fuller's Earth. Of course, Fuller's Earth is brown, and it makes a good explosion, the smoke going up. Well, evidently, they went to the store and they didn't have enough brown, so the kids didn't know. They said, well, we need 25 packages or 30, whatever it was. So they took it in color. I didn't know they'd gotten colored stuff.
Oh,
so they put
just a minute. I got to pause. We got to put a new battery in. We'll pick it up in just a moment. All right, now we got the power going. Now you're talking about the colored Moresco.
Yeah, so we built this battlefield. We have a Japanese island at the end of the field. And we got all the Warner Brothers just finished a picture on Japan, the war with Japan, and so they loaned us palm trees and all sorts of greenery and everything you can think of to put on this battle. Now, when you're pulling a battle scene, you have what they call a keyboard. There's maybe, 100 nails driven into a piece of board, and each nail has a wire running to explosive. And then you had another wire running back with just a nail and a piece of board, and every time you touch one of those nails wherever you wanted to, it sets off an explosion. And of course, it has to be done by a lieutenant, the explosion part. Now he's looking out there and he sees a man right there at the right, so he'll have a bomb go off at the left, and so he doesn't blow someone up. Well, anyway, we put on a hell of a show. We had a big army tank come in, and it comes out of a truck and jumps over a car and smashes the car. And I wish I had one of those old Chevrolets back now. We smashed, but then the troops came out and give a short order drill and all that fancy stuff, and then finally a bomb goes off, and the army trucks come in and unload, and the soldiers start the battle. Now up in the dugout, of course there's no Japanese up there, just the dugout, and we're firing back. They got a machine gun up there firing blanks and things. But the lieutenant starts just touching off, and all of a sudden he looks, and his name was Captain O'Loughlin. I said, Lieutenant, he's a captain by that time, because they kept going up in grades, so when I say their names, I forget their ranks. He said, what the hell's going on out there? And I looked out, and there was this blue and red and green and yellow.
Good fireworks, huh?
Big, and of course it went up in the air a mile. And so it went over good, had a good show, and a lot of civilians, they didn't know the difference to know about whether you're supposed to have colored, they thought the Army, I think, was supposed to have colored explosives. Well, anyway, the next day, they come up to the office and said, Sergeant Monaco, and there was the general, and there was Major Churchill, and I don't remember if Lieutenant James was there or not, but there was a Colonel Broberg, he was the head of the MPs, and there was a congressman, and a couple other minor officers. And I'm over there back of a little desk like that, and they said, it was high, and I went over to the desk and said, yes, what can I do? But they said, you put on a show at the Coliseum yesterday, yes? To sell war bonds, yes. He said, well, we sold a lot of war bonds. And I thought I was going to get praised. They said, can you tell us what went on out there? They said, those explosives, you said that you wouldn't do any damage to the football field.
Oh, boy.
They said, well, every one of those explosives, where they were, dug a hole in the football field. Well, I said, well, I don't know. I said, I didn't set the explosives. I said, Chabot set the explosives. You were responsible. I said, well, yes. So later on, I didn't know it then, but later on I said, well, what the hell happened out there? Well, he said, I didn't think a quarter stick was going to put a good enough show, so I went in half a stick. So Jesus, naturally through all these holes. They said, well, we said, when you set off those explosives, they said some people had their glasses broke. Several people had lacerations in their face.
Oh, man.
Well, I said, that was the people up, they shouldn't have been sitting up so close. They said, no excuses. You put the show on, you're responsible. And we may get a lot of lawsuits. And we have to know what the hell went on out there. And I kept trying to defend myself, but they kept saying, you know, I wasn't. It was my fault. So finally, they all started to leave. And as they left, oh, I know, they said, this man's got to be reprimanded. So the general says, well, I'll see that Sergeant Monaco's reprimanded. You know, real tough. But when they turned around to leave, he turned around and he says, you did a good job. So what the hell is, we went to sell war bonds and we sold a lot of them. Well, I don't think they really got any lawsuits. They had to take them to pay for the doctor bill or something, but it worked out pretty well. Oh, that village you asked me about was a place. Oh, we also built an infiltration course out there. That's when, and the infiltration course, this fellow Gassler I told you about, he designed the infiltration course, and we wanted to make it real. Not most places, they just had an infiltration course where you crawled under the barbed wire and a machine gun shot over your head. We decided to make it real interesting. So we dug big holes with a backhoe, you know, I had them dig holes and made them look like shell holes. And we took Army Jeeps, old wrecked Jeeps, put them in there. And you can get a chemical that smolders. And in the movies they use it a lot. So, of course, I had all that knowledge, see. And so we got that. So just before they was going to have them go through infiltration course, they'd go around and sprinkle some of this stuff like this mist that would crumb up like a Jeep had just burned up or something. And in there, we went over to Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers was a great company to help with the war effort. So any way we wanted. And of course, I knew a lot of people there in the art departments and things, and the prop department. And so they said, oh yeah, we'll do anything. I said, we need some dummies to put out in their battlefield here. So they said, well, we'd make them for you, but we don't have the latex rubber. I said, I could get latex rubber if you will make these dummies for us, because they used to make a lot of dummies for their war pictures, right? Make us some dummies to put out in their field, of rubber. And they said, okay. So the camp, I told Colonel James, we need latex rubber, and they'll make the dummies for you. He said, well, hell, we get a half a dozen barrels or whatever it was. And so they made all these dummies, hundreds of dummies. Some with their inwards cut out and their arms gone and their legs here and messing. And we'd go over to Warner Brothers. Jesus Christ. When we bring some of the stuff home, we went over there to the studio to cast all this, because they had ovens, see, we didn't have them. When we bring the things home at night, we'd have a command car. You know what a command car was? We'd have a command car and a pickup. It always went together. And in the command car, we'd throw the back seat with a whole bunch of those dummies. One arm gone, someone no head.
Oh,
and
boy.
You know, some of the old ladies riding along, they look in there, driving along like this, and maybe there's an arm out there. They look and they say, oh, Jesus, I wonder we didn't cause wrecks. And then there was arms and legs piled in the car, and we take them out there to the infiltration course, and we use this movie blood. It is thick and stuff like that, and we used to get, at first we got pig innards from the Los Angeles slaughterhouses, and we put them in there. When you would crawl down in that ditch, and here would be a dummy that its innards all sticking out, and Jesus, stinking smell.
Oh, yeah.
Give them a real taste of battlefield. But the city of Pasadena got on their ass and said, you can't do that. That's, hi Carrie.
How are you?
They said that is a health hazard. So the college at Pasadena helped us out by coming up with a chemical that would smell like decaying flesh and stuff. And then, of course, the innards, then Warner Brothers cast them, real innards. And they were rubber. But I've got pictures of them. You can see 'em.
And they looked real. So your overall, your Army experience was a big time in your life. A lot of wonderful memories,
Well,
huh?
Yeah, a lot of. Well, anyway, so then the next project was they said, we want to build a street fighting building. We're going to do a lot of street fighting in Europe. And some of the boys should be trained in street fighting. Now, we've been using an old movie set up in Big John Flats, Big Pines, California, and said, but the boys, when they get out there, they have this movie set, and they're playing cowboy.
Yeah.
We go up there, and they said, we want to make that, rebuild that, and make it look like a
Authentic.
German village.
Yeah.
So I took, we were up there 2-3 months, and had a unit of just ourselves. I still left all the, the training center in Santa Anita intact, and I took about 15 men with me, and they used to bring hot meals all the way from the 90 miles from Arcadia up there every day. They bring hot meals, except on Sunday. And Sundays, of course, we had our own cook with us, but he said he cooked breakfast, but the other 2 meals were brought in from Los Angeles. And they said, God, we ate better there than I did in my whole life. Because we figured they're up there in the woods there and keep them happy, get this thing built. Because a order came from Washington to get this town built. And so on Sundays they said, we don't want any food up here because the boys were out shooting the deer, and he used to have venison on Sunday.
Oh my.
and we had a couple big army tents and a cook tent, and we had a nice little, just our own little army. And had, of course, generators and everything. And we had a liaison truck that went every day. He went at night. He'd go to Los Angeles, pick up everything we wanted. The next day he came back. That's all he did, back and forth. So he'd bring mail to us and bring food or anything else we wanted, letters or wires and stuff. And we were just left up there, and nobody bothered, and there was no visitors or anything, except a couple times. The general never even came up until it was finished. We built this place called Anadorf. I don't know why we called it Anadorf, but it seems to me one of the boys' wife's name was Anna or something like that. And we had a fellow, his name was Harry Berkowitz, a Jewish fellow. And we built this German town, and he was a sign painter. And so he painted all the signs because he had been in World War, can you imagine? He was in World War I. And he volunteered and got in World War II. I don't know how the hell he could. He was an old guy. And he painted all those signs. And another fellow by the name of Charlie Anderson. And they copied all the German signs. And inside the buildings, they were all authentic.
Oh, really? They weren't just fronts?
Oh, no.
They weren't facades. They were actually had buildings.
No, but inside was all booby-trapped. So what they do, they take these boys and take them in there at night. And the next morning, just at dawn, they'd have them attack this village. And when they went in the village, of course, it was all booby-trapped, and we had mannequins that jumped up at them and things like that. And they fought like they learned tactics to fight in the village. It was a whole complete town. I'll show you some pictures.
That must have been amazing, and it obviously worked.
Oh, yes. Well, after we built that one, then they had some congressmen came out there and checked it, and then they had 2 or 3 others built somewhere, other camps. But I saw a couple other camps. One they built on Normandy Village, and they didn't put the detail in it. We had curtains and everything in there.
Oh, I bet yours were best. They had to be best.
The place, see, all the secretaries, I had about 80 girls, I guess, worked for us at the training center in Los Angeles. And they made curtains and everything. And the other boys, they made all the beer labels and all the bottle labels. And they used to have them cast the bottles and things for the bills because when they come in, they'd shoot the goddamn place up. So then you had to have new bottles and things. And they had to be, we couldn't use glass bottles because somebody could get hurt. So they were made out of styrene wax. And then down at the training center, they'd bring them up when they finished them, and they kept 4 or 5 boys making bottles all the time, and they made all the labels and printed them. And they had tablecloths and tables and also.
All right, we put another battery in. We were talking about tablecloths and curtains and stuff you had in that village, and
here.
all of that good stuff.
See this here?
All right, here's a actual picture of it, the construction and the finished product.
Let me see if I can.
And this is amazing. And if I tip this whole thing over, I'll be in big trouble. But these buildings, they were authentic. They weren't just facades like they had in the movies.
Some more.
That was incredible. Now I'm going to flip it over and take a look at the other side here. These buildings, just to get an idea, I had in my mind what it might have looked like.
Here's interior.
This is amazing. When you said authentic, you weren't kidding. You weren't kidding. They were absolutely real. Okay, just a minute now. We can only show a couple at a time here. I'll flip it over. And what did you call this place?
Anadorf.
Anadorf. You have no idea why, but you called it Anadorf, huh?
Yep.
I
think one of the boys' wife was named Anna
or something. Wow, look at that. I'm going to show this tank, John. But wait a minute.
Tank?
Yeah, just a minute now. I'm looking at this tank here. And on the flip side is that gas chamber you talked about. The one that leaked and you discovered duct tape shortly after that. All right, what was the one you just wanted to show me?
You remember that I told you about that? There they are.
Oh, boy.
Here the bastards are. See, we were making a training film.
Yeah.
See, well, there they are.
And there's
shooting closer, and finally they blew the damn thing up. I could kill them.
Your beautiful little tank, huh? You show one of those, and then I can flip the.
Well, I didn't build the tank.
I can
I
flip
was
it.
in charge of it.
All right, here we are. Show another shot, a side view, and get an idea what some of these things were.
They're the first charts.
Oh, I see. The charts you were making.
Those are charts. 4x8 charts. See?
Okay. That's how many did you make altogether, would you guess? Hundreds.
Oh, thousands.
Thousands?
I'll tell you, one time they were making these. Had to order. Major Churchill came up and said, Monaco, we got a notice from Washington that they're going to send a lot of men overseas. They're on their way. They're starting right now, and they have had no training, none at all. We got to have all the charts and all the stuff you can get for those men as fast as you can. We want the stuff when they get to Europe, to England, that they'll have the stuff there. Can you do it? We have to have 700 charts plus some models anyway. We had quite a few models built ahead. And they said, can you do it? I said, yep, providing you do what I say. See, they said, I wasn't a very good soldier. One man said to, I think it was Colonel Broberg, said one to the Colonel James one time, he said, you know, Monaco and his crew, they don't follow any rules. They break all the rules, all the regulation, everything else. And I think something ought to be done about it. And she says, well, I'll tell you, nothing's going to be done about it because they do the work that is expected of them. They get the work done. So anyway, they said, we got to have 700 charts plus all this other stuff. We will have an aeroplane sitting back in Burbank. There will be an aeroplane ready to take this stuff to Europe the minute. Usually, of course, they take it to New York, and then I guess I don't know how the hell it got there. But it said, we got to have that stuff done. Can you do it? Yes, if you'll do what I say. First of all, I want 3 or 4 cots, army cots, set up here, and mattresses. I want food sent here, you know, instead of going to the boys, go to the mess halls. The food is sent here, and I want 24 hours a day, around the clock, coffee, cookies, a smorgasbord sort of set up, and every man gets a 3-day pass when it's over. And they said, well, if you can do it, well, they'll get it. I said, plus, but they get that on the weekend. That gives them 5 days. They said, okay. Now, I said, so I got the boys together. I said, now look, this is all volunteer work. If you want to do this, here's what I promise you. 5 days off, all the good food you can have, and you can eat 24 hours a day. I don't care, as long as you're carrying to work. I've got to have those models and those charts finished. They all agreed to it. And what they did, they worked around the clock. And as a matter of fact, I think they enjoyed it. They'd work, and all these, some were all hand-colored, you know. And drawing and printing, and presses are running and everything. And then they said, I think they liked it because I think they'd work like hell for 4 or 5 hours, and then take a nap, and then they eat, and didn't have to go back to barracks or anything. Of course, we had restrooms and everything, but they didn't take any showers.
So they really worked at it.
And they worked at it. And we got the thing done and gave it to McCloskey and Chabot and said, take this to the airport. And they sent them to the airport with a Jeep and an MP Jeep back of them. They followed, wanted to protect them. And they took them and put them on the airplane. And they got to Europe in time.
That was wonderful. What an accomplishment that was. Just hand me more pictures and tell me what it is, and I'll show them to the camera. That's amazing stuff.
Well, this.
Just tell me what it is, and we'll show it to the camera.
This is the office. That's their control office right here. But this came after.
Okay, I see the old typewriters in there, right?
Trying to show you some early days.
It's kind of neat. And I want to show on the other side where you talked about cubicles, how you set up cubicles. Maybe you're the one that invented cubicles.
I don't know.
That's the way many offices are designed now, with short partitions between the cubicles.
Look.
Yeah, we showed that before.
And
yeah.
They have a sham battle. You see, this is what it looked like at first. There was an old set, see, and I turned it all into this.
Oh,
color.
I see. You made the transformation of the old set. We showed this before. Now we'll tell people what it was. Took an old like an old movie set, right?
Yeah.
And then turned it into a replica city. All right. Just anything you want to show,
look,
you just give it to
When I
me.
started training aides, I had those fellows you saw there in that picture.
Yeah, yeah.
That 5 guys. That was the beginning of training aides. That's all there was.
Oh,
This is what it was when I finished.
wow. What a group. I wonder if how many of
They
these
were
guys...
I'll tell you, those guys were artists and illustrators from some of the best magazines. We had a couple fellows from Esquire. We had the fellow who used to do all the Time Life magazine covers. We had the fellow from who was one of the head of Chenard Institute.
Right here. Right here.
Yeah.
And that's David Niven, I thought, in there with the cigar, isn't it? Doesn't that look like David Niven?
Yeah, it's, this. There's a. We kept growing a little bit bigger. See.
All right, let's show what the work site was all about.
Now
That's
look,
really very
this is
interesting.
my first crew.
All right, just a second. I want to show the flip side here to show what some of those anatomical things were that you were talking about.
Oh,
I got some of them right here. See, I just showed these right here with the insects and the whole 9 yards.
You saw the interior.
Yeah, we
right?
saw the interiors.
And
What a project! This was major stuff you were doing here.
well, I never give it much thought.
Well,
Now, this,
yeah,
see,
that's pretty amazing.
This it kept growing. When
All
it
right.
first started in, here it is over here. See?
Just very small, and it
There's-
kept,
Well, the mean Gassler and Kellison. That's the whole crew.
there you are. That's when it first started, kind of small.
Yep.
And then just grew larger
then
and
I
larger and larger.
Then when I came into the cubicle deal, I had cubicles and 2 men to each place.
Ah, okay.
Like that.
Just a minute. We'll show this side, and this is kind of neat. Let me see. Oh yeah. Well, now you're getting into serious business here. The drafting and designing of all
That's
this
what it used
stuff.
to be before I put the cubicles in.
Oh, I see what you mean. That's what it looked. That's the before and after, huh? This is all in Southern California.
That's in Arcadia, Los Angeles Turf Club, Santa Anita racetrack.
That's what. Oh, Santa Anita, huh?
Yeah, so they turned the whole place over to us. I'll tell
Okay.
you something funny. You know the tote board out there, they cost a lot of money. Of course, $60,000 is nothing today, right? But they had the tote board and they had the cable that runs from the racetrack for all the betting booths out and totes out, call it the tote board, so people can see what's going on. And one day, one of the boys came in and said, "Hey, Sarge," he said, "we can't get the tanks across the infield there. We want to line them up there for, training, and we can't get over there because there's a cable across the road." And I said, "So cut the goddamn thing." "Are you sure you want to cut it?" I said, "Yes." We said, "Well, we can't cut it with this cable cutters because it's too big." I said, "Well, take an axe or saw it off or something. Just cut it." So they did. Nothing was ever said, but about when we closed Santa Anita racetrack, and about a month or so before we closed it, they come to me and said, "Monaco, we understand. Do you know what you did to that cable out there?" I said, "What?" And they said, "Well, they're here now getting Santa Anita, know the war's going to end, and they're going to get ready for, get it back in shape, and we're leaving." They said, "Who gave the order to cut that cable?" And I said, "Well, I did." They said, "Well, you know what that cable was?" I said, "Well, a cable to keep somebody from crossing the road." He said, "No, that was a tote board cable, and it's going to cost the government $60,000. And it's your fault."
I love it.
Well, geez. I was always in some mess like that, but you know something?
Yeah, with the...
That old general, he must have liked me, because they always got me out of everything. He said, "Well, what? So he cut the cable. So what?" He
Isn't
cut the
that
cable, but
amazing?
he did all this stuff for the war effort. But I used to feel a little bit guilty.
Just
Because
a little bit, huh?
Here I was. I did volunteer to go overseas. I went to the Lieutenant Churchill and said, look, I want to go overseas and fight. And he said, look, the best thing you can do is go back upstairs and take your men and do the job you're supposed to do. First of all, you would be no good out in the field. You don't know anything about fighting. What do you think you're going to get in the boat and run over to there and go start shooting the Germans? I said, well, the boys all want to go. He said, yeah, but you're better off to do the thing you know how to do. You don't know how to go out and fight a war, but you do know how to make stuff to help the other guy fight the war. That was there. They finally ended up with it at my main office, see.
All right, let's take a look at it.
But that was the first ones. There was just a little old hole along.
That's very interesting. I want to show this newspaper because this is February 22nd to 28th, 2001, and here's that picture we showed before. And this is a newspaper that's printed here in northern New York. So you've been talked about lots of different places. Somebody said you were on the History Channel 3 different times. Now they want to do it again?
Yeah.
All right. What's
Look,
this?
This is a collating table. It had electric motor under, and it turned.
Oh.
Because back in those days, you didn't have an automatic.
You didn't have automatic
So we had
collators,
those
so they
old-
had to do it. The table would turn. You'd put
Yeah.
your piece on
And
top
those
of
old
it.
ladies, they're the ones that made all the curtains and the stuff for the the
Oh
can.
my! Look at that. And on the
They
other
found
side,
Anita.
what do we got? Printing presses over
Printing
here,
presses.
huh? I mean, you had this.
Now
was-
we
this
had
was-
all girls. See, all right. When I first started in,
Yeah.
we didn't have any girls. And finally, I kept getting some of these civilian girls, and we got one or two. And then the first thing you know, look at them.
They're
Had
all
80
over
of
the place. 80
There
girls.
they are running the mimeograph.
Oh my!
Of course, we didn't have any copying machines in those days, or
No,
mimeographs.
you know, I'm very familiar, of course, with mimeograph machines. My dad was a minister, and there was always mimeographing going on, and
Yeah.
you had to
Here,
you type the stencil and put it on the mimeograph and get ink all over your hands and
Now, this
make
is
a
a model
mess.
shop, just where they built wooden models and stuff.
Oh my!
And that's the photography room.
All right, let's show this.
We had a complete.
You had pretty much, and did you have to build this pretty
I
much
had a
from
movie
scratch?
studio, what I had.
Yeah, well, look at that experience, what
See
that
here?
was for you.
There's more model shop.
Oh yeah, I can
you
see
that guy right there.
in the middle, the guy that's
You
right.
see, they used to get people to come up there. I think that was there, and get somebody up there, and then they get down on the floor and they paint the tips of your shoes. So I took my wife, came visiting one day, bring up. First thing you know, Chabot disappears. My wife's walking along. She looked. Oh my God! I got a red and green shoe, and her girlfriend had a purple and something else. The boys just would get down on the floor.
And paint the shoes.
Yeah. Well, one day they painted the wrong person's shoes because somebody came up there, and then the general, I don't mean the general, the lieutenant came up to the desk too, and they thought it was some of the civilians going
Yeah.
through the place, and they painted their shoes
Got
too.
the shoes painted.
But they had a
Let's
good
take a look
sense
at
of
that. Show our audience what he's doing down there on his
Did
knees.
you ever hear of Luella Parsons?
Oh, did I ever hear of Luella Parsons?
Well, Luella came over to see. There's that nice army tank. God damn it, God, move that down.
That's a nice. How big was that model? About 4 feet,
3 feet.
3-4 feet.
Beautiful model.
It's absolutely beautiful. That would have been built out
And
of plywood,
the
or
trike, it was plywood and metal and everything else. The fellow who did the trike, most of the trike fleets, he used to be a jeweler, so he did a fine job.
It's incredible. Luella Parsons, finish your
You
story.
see this?
Okay.
See, that's a real, I forget what you call it, where you load the cannon.
Oh, I see.
And there's the model of it.
Oh
So
my.
you see here, you could take 10, 20 men around and show them how this worked, right? But you get a model this big, you can show it to.
That
lot
is
more.
absolutely incredible.
Then here's the a whole bunch of models. Tanks were turning out.
Oh, I see. Look at this. That's absolutely incredible.
Before George Lucas.
Oh, hey,
Yeah.
here's that aeroplane.
Oh, I got to take a look at that in just a minute.
And they said, Jesus, you
I
can't use that.
can't let you forget that Luella Parsons story. You
Oh,
started to
well.
tell me about Luella.
Luella Parsons came one time. Mrs. Milestone said, would you mind if I brought Luella Parsons over to see the camp? And I said, I'd love to have you bring her over. And she brought her there, and I said to Mrs. Parsons, I said, oh, Mrs. Parsons, you wouldn't remember me, because I'm not anybody to be remembered. But she said, these are all exhibits, we put on in the city.
Yeah, we can show those while you're talking. Tell me the story. You wouldn't
And she
remember
said,
me.
You wouldn't remember me, because, why would you remember? And she says, oh, I remember you. You used to be over at Kendall's. And I said, oh, yes. And she said, I took her all through the place, and she went back and she wrote the nicest story
Did she?
about training aids department, what they were doing for the war effort. These boys aren't just artists sitting there drawing pretty pictures. They're really turning out stuff that was important.
I think you've proved that here today if you haven't proved
There's
anything else.
It snowed while we were there.
Oh, my.
You see all those trees?
Yeah.
Well, they're up around the church and everything. Well, there wasn't any trees there. See the little fountains?
Oh, yes.
There wasn't any trees there, so we had to, around the church, so we knew the general was coming up the last day when it was finished.
Yeah.
The general and the press and all the people that had to come check everything out,
Yeah.
So we had the boys go up and dig, I must have been 100 trees. Not dig them, but cut them off and stick them in the ground.
Stick them in the ground.
And for, for 2 days, geez, they look good.
Isn't that
For
amazing?
2-3 days. Now,
Yeah,
you see
these
what
are some of the-
happens this. As we were building the village, back at the camp, every day I would send a sketch or a picture of
They would reproduce
what
it
we're
in
doing.
scale.
And Al Salzman, he was working on this. This is a scale model, and all the little buildings are about 3-4 inches high, and he built a scale model of this.
Isn't that amazing?
So they could see our progress
Yeah.
without coming up to the
Without going
camp.
all the way up there to do it. That's truly amazing.
Please, dogs, be quiet.
We don't mind a few sound effects. This is great. This is really great stuff. Because you've got before and after pictures to show how the progress was when you were making these
Yeah, that
buildings.
fellow painting the signs. Please.
There we are. Let me see. Boy, this was spectacular.
There's a burgomaster's house,
I wonder what they did with it.
and that's the town hall. Well, I'll tell you what they did with it. I went back and see, there's a church up there, and all the little trees around here are fake.
They're all fake?
Sorry
Let me
about
see.
that
Let me
dog.
see. Don't we worry about the dog. That's all right. It's perfectly all right.
Oh, here's. Gee, look at this.
This is kind of spectacular. Look at this side. It's so wonderful that you preserved these photographs for now, because I've never in my life have I ever seen anything like this. And that's what you were talking about, isn't it? Boy, they'd love that the kids today would love that for one of those crazy movies that they like to watch, wouldn't it? Look at this. And this was all fake stuff, huh?
Yeah.
Wow, look at this one. I don't know. You'd have to have a pretty strong stomach to face this in person, but that's the best kind of training, huh?
See, there's more of the battle. Put on all kind of demonstrations.
Okay, let's take a look at the demonstrations. Wow.
This is when the thing just first started, the battle.
Okay, let's take a look at that. Oh, yes, right there. In the Coliseum, right?
Yep.
That's where you made holes in the football field, right? We just want to get that for the record, you know.
See, this is a battle.
Well, let me flip this over. Got a couple of neat things to take a look at on this side. Wouldn't it be funny if some of the people who are watching this were actually there at that time?
Yeah.
Boy, look at this. Talk about realistic things. And all this was made out of latex rubber? Is that what you're telling me? Latex rubber?
Yep.
Well, you made a
There's a
considerable effort toward training these people.
These are all the girls at Santa Anita. And that McCloskey, he was all those girls worked under him.
I see.
I mean, they all worked under me, but that was his project.
Well, let's just take a look at them.
We had civilian girls.
Now, what is this on this side? What's that? Just a...
That's just a little battle scene or something we made in miniature for something.
Is it? It sure looks real to me.
Yeah, well. See, there he is with the tank again, getting ready to...
Oh, that's that wonderful tank that you...
Yeah,
He's a
wonderful guy, but damn him,
He blew that thing up, and you'll never forget him for blowing that.
Oh, and then you know what?
What?
You know where he ended up? He was a great soldier. He went to, when Land Santa needed a seat, when the war, after we beat Germany, they said, well, better cut down the trainings now. So they still have Aberdeen Training Center.
Yeah.
That'll always be there for life. But the one in California was temporary. So they had that, they closed it up, and when they closed it up, they sent people to different places. And they sent Chabot, well, he volunteered to go overseas. Of course, a lot of them didn't volunteer, but they got sent over there anyway. And he became a scout for Patton. He was in Patton's army. And after the war, he came back here, and he always told me, I had asked him about Patton, he said, well, he was a real son of a bitch. But he said, you know, I wouldn't care to serve on anybody else but him. He
Well,
said,
that's the reputation.
yeah, he said he was a great general. I'd go and follow him anywhere, but I said he was still a bastard.
Well,
But that's what made him great.
Isn't that amazing? We're going to pause for just a moment and continue. And I should let you know that we're talking to Arto Monaco, the founder of the Land of Make-Believe and just about anything else in the universe from what we've learned here in Upper J, New York. It's amazing how the time flies when you're having fun. We wanted to show you this picture. Now, this is a 45, right? That you made a copy of. Absolutely incredible for demonstration purposes. We didn't cover 1/10 of the Army experience. We haven't covered 1/1000th of the life of Arto Monaco. And so whether he likes it or not, we got to come back another time. We haven't even got into the Land of Make-Believe and all these other story towns and all these other places all around northern New York and New England that he had a effect upon. We didn't even get into the fact that my kids, who are now 50 years old, spent their childhoods here when they were small children enjoying the Land of Make-Believe, and it gave them an idea what having fun and playing was all about. We're going to cover a lot of those topics next time. If you enjoyed this program, you keep watching and make sure you support Hometown Cable and this show, because it enables us to take a trip like we took today toward the end of April 2001 up to near the former home of the Land of Make-Believe in Upper J, New York. Arto Monaco, thanks so much for allowing us to come into your life, sharing some of those wonderful, great stories of a couple of years ago with us. And yes, we're going to come back to see you.
Fine, I'm very pleased to have you visit me.
You have no idea. The man was and is an artist, an inventor, a toy maker, a prankster. We found out a lot of his pranks during the Second World War. He's never taken himself too seriously. If he can take his army life as lightly as he did and keep his good humor through age 88, and yes, he's battled through some pretty serious illnesses in his lifetime, and he took a licking and came out ticking. That's what he did. And we're going to come back here again to Upper J, New York. We thank you all for watching, and who knows where we're going to be next time for our little corner. It's a cool April 27th, 2001. Our little corner cameras are in Upper J, New York at the former home of the Land of Make-Believe. We've come to get the life story of Arto Monaco. It's been done many times before. A fine job was done on public television not too many years ago. A recent article in the Adirondack Life magazine chronicles this very interesting man's life. A lot of tragedies actually connected with this particular location, and having recorded this program in the spring of the year, I think you can get a taste for what I mean. The AuSable River is not raging at this time, but it has numerous times in the past. And this man, who was born in AuSable Forks in 1913, persevered for a long time after opening the Land of Make-Believe here in 1954. But Calvin said as we were driving here, he was thinking of the old man in the sea. And we can apply Arto Monaco to the theme, the old man and the river, because Mother Nature won. The river won in this case. Arto tried to rebuild several times and finally gave up on it. But the man is a veritable genius in many aspects, as you're going to find out in the course of our Little Corners program today, as an inventor and a toy man and an entrepreneur and Hollywood worker for various studios and inventor of games and toys. It's just incredible what the man has done in his productive long life. We're here to interview Arto today and to find out the story of how he's touched so many thousands of young lives and, yeah, even a few older lives in the course of his multifarious career. This is what the Land of Make-Believe looked like. This is where I used to bring my kids 40 years ago or more. It's closed for the most part now, and Arto has a newer studio which was constructed in 1997, just around the corner and up the road a piece, and we're going to visit him there. I might tell you at this point, if you have never watched one of our programs all the way through, now would be the time. Now would be a good opportunity to gather your kids and grandma and everybody around the tube and watch our little corner, because you're going to see how it happened, how the Land of Make-Believe started, how it's connected with a similar place in New Hampshire, how it's connected with various other theme parks here in New York State. I think you'll be amazed, entertained, and edified. Stay with us as we talk to Arto Monaco in Upper J, New York.